This weird game is getting a movie, and I have thoughts. The Backrooms is an internet concept made by an unknown 4chan user in 2019. It has no context, no specific story, but it created a mythology on the internet that has transcended any other creepypasta. So much so that it has a movie to come out later this week. The original post states that if you're not careful and you no clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the back rooms, where it's nothing but the stink of old moist carpet, the madness of mono yellow, the endless background noise of fluorescent lights at maximum humbus, and approximately 600 million square miles of randomly segmented empty rooms to be trapped in. God save you if you hear something wandering around nearby, because it sure as hell has heard you. It seems nothing special at first. It's a normal creepypasta type of lore that can and is probably written by a random dude in their basement. But from there, it gained internet traction. It reached Reddit threads and it inspired game developers to create games with a similar vibe to the original post. However, some chose to go some other directions. Additionally, it manifested wikis and people making weird lore about the concept. Users introduced the concept of layers and levels in the backrooms, which was used by developers as another feature in their games. Otherworldly inhabitants were also created by the fandom. These are hostile entities that live inside the backrooms. This was emphasized in the short film done by the director, Kane Parsons, entitled The Backrooms Found Footage. This short film sparked a whole series for Parsons, which ultimately got him the role as director of a feature-length film, and for good reason. This series of short videos goes to show the potential of a film solely dedicated to this weird concept. Overall, it snowballed from a small internet post of a weird picture of a basement to an internet and cultural phenomenon that inspired many users. You could connect it to the internet being the internet and taken this random piece of media and attaching pages and pages of lore to it. But you could also look into how it psychologically triggered many uncanny fears in its fandom. And here's the key thing. All of this worked because nobody was in charge of it. Most of the lore and background of the backrooms came from people's headcanon and nothing else. Most of the spin-offs people have done are passion projects which does not require any producers or executives to meddle with the creative process. In reality, a higher studio can and will prioritize money and budget over creative direction. Fortunately, however, A24 is an entertainment company known for giving independence to its directors. Thus, it all hinges on how director Kane Parsons executes on this tall task. Firstly, the task of making the audience feel the right feelings, one that is evocative of the original mythos. Which brings me to my next point.
Fear is a tool.
Fear is an obvious subject to tackle. Well, fear is the usual feeling that you would expect in consuming a piece of horror media. But the Backrooms has a specific subtype of fear that is often not the main focus in mainstream media: liminal fear. Liminal fear or liminophobia is the unsettling or panic-inducing psychological response triggered by liminal spaces. Liminal spaces are those areas and buildings that serve as transition spots from one place to another. This includes hallways, fire exits, and weird stairwells. It serves as this uncanny valley for architecture where boundaries are seemingly undefined, which has a sense of infiniteness to the concept. The reason the lore kept growing, the reason strangers kept adding levels and entities and rules to something that started as one anonymous image, is because that image tapped into something psychological that most horror media rarely touches. However, I see it personally as the fear of infiniteness, particularly the fear of the unknown. These horror trends are typical in horror media. A piece of media that does it extremely well is The Haunting of Hill House. Aside from having clever shots of negative spaces that urge the viewers to use their imagination, it also has a unique story structure that makes the plot itself the unknown. The Backrooms in this sense is similar. It has very little lore and information initially, and all it has is infinite nothingness. It creates this two-pronged system of unknown that is significantly better than just being implicitly ambiguous or physically empty. Aside from these two obvious ones, there is one that is a bit more implicit. Going back to the original post, the user said that if you're not careful and you no clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the backrooms. In gaming terms, the term no clip basically refers to phasing through walls. In other words, to reach the backrooms, you need to enter a space in reality that should not physically exist. This is closely linked to dissociative anxiety, or the realization, which is a clinical experience where the world around you suddenly feels unreal, like something you could just step out of. In essence, the fear that we are living in a world that is not true. This type of fear is often tackled in the mainstream media. Movies such as The Truman Show, The Matrix, or Inception feature characters that live in realities that are shaped and artificial. However, the key difference between these films and the Backrooms is that it's not horror. This concept is typically used in sci-fi films as a weird plot twist or idea featured in the movie. But in the Backrooms, it's the driving force on how and why it became so large. It merged this seemingly scientific and analytical concept in our story beats and merged it with horror media, an abstract phenomenon that is perfectly captured by the existence of an infiniteness born out of nothingness. In this section, we talked about three types of fears that ultimately contributed to how a simple image invokes such terror in the community. The film has a task to immerse the audience even better than a game does. It also needs to get their attention for an entire feature length film, not just the length of a short film or short game. And a direction that I love that many games about the backrooms are adapting is found footage.
Josh's mom and my mom.
This type of filmmaking is not necessarily new in the horror landscape. Me personally, I hate these types of horror movies because it feels so real and so raw. Even the simplest of conversations can become eerily creepy to this point of view. And this direction is adapted heavily in many popular games of the backrooms. An example, played by Markiplier, is the complex found footage. This short game uses the backroom concept for all its horror. It has beautiful graphics that seem like the pixels out of a digital camera. It has the proper lighting and direction which really sells the backrooms concept. But if it works for other media, what makes it specifically better in the backrooms? Because the backrooms was born as found footage. It was born out of a random post by a random guy from our side of the screen, which makes it even creepier. This is because found footage is a format that bridges fiction to reality by providing the viewers with authentic scenes, dialogues, and interactions. But since the backrooms was born out of our world, the feeling of rawness from found footage makes it that more real. The reason why backrooms work so well is that it is so incredibly fictional, yet through the bridge of found footage direction, it can feel so real. Let me be clear though, I want this movie to be great. But here is my last concern. Everything that made the backrooms work, the anonymous posting, the realness to the original image, the fear of the unknown and infiniteness, as well as never truly explaining itself, is the exact opposite of what a mainstream feature film requires. A movie needs a story, let alone a film that is set to be released worldwide. It requires an engaging plot with likable and relatable characters. It actually needs a script that is believable in the universe that they are building. This is where it either becomes something special, proof of how an independent artist can create a well-crafted film born out of the mythology of the internet, or a fan-made project disguising itself as a feature-length film starring Hollywood actors. By the time you watch this video, the movie will most likely be out in some countries. So I don't know how this video will age. However, as of now, I am craving a film that is unsettling, eerie, and captures the paradoxical claustrophobia from sheer infiniteness. And if the film is anywhere close to this without feeling artificial and directionless, then I'd be beyond excited about what filmmakers can do with the plethora of horror fiction still out there.